The universe is full of strange worlds and different kinds of life, but not every world is made for danger. Far across a quiet part of the galaxy, there was a gentle planet called Valora. It was a beautiful world filled with soft winds, oceans, glowing forests, and creatures that lived without fear. The people of this world, the Valorians, were known everywhere for their peaceful nature. They were thin, graceful beings with light blue skin and eyes that shined like crystal water. Their society was built around harmony, learning, and cooperation. They did not believe in violence, and most of them had never even seen a weapon. Life on their planet had been calm for many generations. Their cities were full of tall crystal towers, floating gardens, and shimmering lights that moved with the rhythm of the wind. Children played without the fear of danger. Elders shared stories of old times, and scientists spent their days studying stars and planets instead of war. No one on Valora imagined that one day, everything they knew would be threatened. One evening, as the twin moons of Valora rose into the sky, the Council of Elders gathered for a meeting inside a large hall built from glowing stone. The hall always felt warm and peaceful, but tonight, a strange tension filled the air. A young scout had returned from the outer colonies with terrible news. He stood in front of the council, shaking slightly as he spoke. The Ravix, a brutal and aggressive alien species, had attacked an outer settlement without warning. They destroyed buildings, captured resources, and took many Valorians as prisoners. The scout's voice trembled as he explained that the Ravok ships were still moving deeper into Valorian territory. The council members exchanged worried glances. They were not prepared for something like this. Their planet had no army, no soldiers, and no real defense systems. They had always believed that if they lived peacefully, others would do the same. The idea of fighting was not just unfamiliar, was terrifying. But the news made it impossible to pretend the danger would go away on its own. For the first time in hundreds of years, fear spread through the peaceful halls of Valora while the council discussed what to do. The general population of the planet continued their daily lives, unaware of the danger moving closer. In the main city, families enjoyed their evening meals. Musicians played gentle songs by the river, and students sat under glowing trees reading books. If someone had told them that an enemy was coming, most would have laughed nervously, thinking it was impossible. After all, who would want to hurt a world like theirs? A world that only wanted peace. But not everyone in the galaxy cared about peace. The Ravix came from a harsh, violent world where survival meant fighting every day. They were strong, tall creatures with dark metallic skin and sharp features. Their technology was focused on war, and their culture respected strength over kindness. When the Ravoks looked at Valora, they did not see a peaceful civilization. They saw a weak one. To them, Valora was an easy target full of resources they could steal without facing resistance. The Valorians had one last hope, a small communication room in the heart of their capital. It was used for sending messages to other friendly worlds, mostly for scientific collaboration or cultural exchanges. No one on Valora ever imagined it would be used to send a desperate cry for help, but now, it was their only choice. The council decided to send an SOS message into deep space, hoping someone, anyone, would hear it. The message was short, simple, and full of fear. It explained that the Valorian colonies were under attack, that their people were dying, and that they had no way to defend themselves. It was a plea for mercy, a plea for survival, a plea made by a civilization that had never known war. They encoded the message with their planet's location and sent it into the dark emptiness of the galaxy. After the signal was transmitted, the communication room fell silent. No one knew if it would reach a friendly ear or disappear forever light years away. On a planet that was nothing like Valora, humanity went about its usual chaotic routine. Earth was known throughout the galaxy as a death world, a place filled with dangerous environments, unpredictable weather, and creatures that evolved through constant struggle. Humans had grown up in a world where danger was normal. Their bodies, their minds, and even their instincts were shaped by survival. They were stubborn, quick to act, and surprisingly hard to kill. Other species often saw them as reckless or terrifying, but they also knew something else. Humans were impossible to ignore. In a large communications center built on one of Earth's orbiting space stations, a group of technicians monitored incoming signals from across the universe. Most of the time, they received harmless transmissions, research data, trade requests, or simple interplanetary greetings. But one day, a strange signal appeared on their screens. It was weak, shaky, and filled with heavy emotion. One of the technicians opened the message and frowned as he listened. It was the Valorian SOS. He immediately alerted his supervisor. Within minutes, the message was sent to Earth's Global Leadership Council. They listened in silence as the helpless voice of a Valorian elder begged for help. The room grew tense. Humanity had seen many distress calls before, but something about this one felt different. The Valorians were not fighters. They were not a military threat. They were simply a peaceful group of people asking for protection. The leaders exchanged serious looks. They knew humans were feared by many races, but they also knew humans never walked away from someone who was suffering. It was part of their nature. When someone called for help, humanity reacted quickly and with force. Their history full of wars, resistance, and rebuilding had taught them to never leave the weak behind. On Earth, When someone cried for help, it was taken as a personal responsibility as the leadership council discussed what to do. Military commanders were already preparing reports. They analyzed the signal's coordinates, the identity of the attackers, and the estimated danger level. When they learned that the Ravaks were behind the assault, the decision became even clearer. The Ravaks were known troublemakers in the galaxy. They believed in domination and cruelty. Humanity had clashed with them before and knew their methods. Helping the Valorians meant more than saving one civilization. It meant stopping the spread of Ravok's power. It didn't take long for Earth to make a decision. They would not send negotiators. They would not send warnings. They would send the fleet. Across Earth-controlled space, activity exploded. Massive warships that had been resting in deep space docks powered up. Engines roared to life. Pilots suited up for battle. Soldiers received mission briefings. Engineers loaded supplies, weapons, and medical units. Every part of the human fleet moved with synchronized precision, something only Deathworlders could manage under pressure. Other alien colonies near Earth watched with shock and confusion. They had heard legends of humanity's reaction to distress signals, but witnessing it with their own eyes was something else entirely. Ships the size of small cities lifted off from orbital platforms. Carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels lined up in formation. It was a terrifying and beautiful sight. No other species in the galaxy mobilized so fast. Why? Because humans understood fear. They understood loss. They understood what it felt like to stand alone, hoping someone stronger would come. And they refused to let another peaceful civilization die while they had the power to help. Meanwhile, back on Valora, the people waited anxiously. They monitored the space around their planet, hoping to see anything that would show their message had been answered. Days passed. The Ravaks continued moving deeper into Valorian territory. More colonies fell. The main planet prepared for the worst. Families packed what little they had and hid in underground shelters. Teachers held crying children close. The air became heavy with fear. The council members gathered again, this time feeling hopeless. Their beautiful world, the world they had protected with kindness and wisdom, was slipping away. Some elders whispered that perhaps no one had heard their cry. Others wondered if the message had reached a species too afraid to interfere. But no one said it aloud. No one wanted to admit that they might be truly alone but far away, across the stars. Humanity was already on the move. Inside the largest human battleship, commanders studied star charts and prepared strategies. They knew they had to move fast. Every minute mattered. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, leaving behind long streaks of blue light as they vanished into the cosmic void. The journey felt long for the Valorians, but for the human fleet, it was a focused rush. Every ship traveled at maximum speed. Soldiers reviewed mission readings again and again. Pilots rested with their helmets beside them. Medics checked supplies. No one complained. No one hesitated. They all understood that a peaceful people were depending on them. Asterisk and somewhere between the stars. The SOS signal continued to echo, carrying the voice of a world that did not want to die. The Valorians did not know it yet, but their call had reached the one species in the galaxy that never ignored cries for help. A species shaped by storms, fire, and danger. A species that moved with intensity when others froze. A species others feared and respected for the same reason. Humans were coming, and when Deathworlders came, they never came softly. The situation on Valora grew worse with every passing hour. What started as a frightening news report had now turned into a living nightmare for the peaceful Valora. There were a people who believed in harmony, in soft voices and gentle actions, but none of that mattered anymore. The Ravaks were advancing fast, like a dark shadow spreading across their skies, swallowing everything in its path. Villages that had been calm and full of life just days before were now piles of broken homes and shattered lights. Families who had never known fear were now packing small bags, trying to escape to safer areas even though no place truly felt safe. In the capital city, the Council of Elders met again, but this time the room felt smaller, heavier, and filled with an unspoken panic. The elders looked exhausted, their faces pale and their eyes worried. They had hoped that after sending the distress signal into space, help might arrive soon. They had hoped the galaxy was full of kind-hearted civilizations that would react as quickly as they themselves would if someone asked for help. But days had passed, and no answer had come. Every second that ticked away felt like a countdown to destruction. One of the youngest council members stepped forward. She had always believed strongly in peace, but now even she struggled to hold on to hope. She asked if perhaps they should evacuate the planet, but the older members shook their heads. They had nowhere to go. Valora was their home, the only place they understood, and their ships were too few and too weak to carry the entire population. Even if they left, the Ravaks would chase them. Running wasn't the solution. The elders decided to strengthen their shelters and move people underground. It wasn't much, but it was all they could do. As they sent messages across the planet, instructing citizens to seek safety, the fear spreading through the population became impossible to hide. Children cried, asking their parents if everything would be okay. Parents lied softly, promising safety they couldn't guarantee. Teachers closed schools, Nurses prepared makeshift clinics, and scientists tried to send more SOS signals in case the first one had not reached anyone. While Valera prepared to face darkness, humanity was rising into action like a storm ready to break free. On Earth, the arrival of the distress signal had caused a powerful reaction. Humanity had grown from generations of struggle on a dangerous planet, so when they heard someone calling for help, their instincts pushed them to respond immediately. Their emotions moved fast, and their decisions moved even faster. The moment the Global Leadership Council confirmed the authenticity of the Valorian SOS, everything changed. Inside Earth's war rooms, holographic screens lit up with star charts showing the Valorian system. Commanders communicated through deep space channels with different fleet units scattered across human colonies. Orders were short, sharp, and clear. The message was simple: prepare for deployment. There was no hesitation. It didn't matter that the Valorians were strangers. It didn't matter that they lived on a peaceful world humans had never visited. They were living beings in danger, and for humans, that was enough. The rising challenge wasn't only about the threat growing on Valor, it was also about the enormous task humanity faced. The distance was long, the enemy was powerful, and the timing was tight. But none of this slowed humans down. If anything, it pushed them harder. The first big challenge was organizing the fleet. Human space was enormous, and their ships were spread across different regions. To gather them in one place required intense coordination. On every military station, alarms rang. Pilots ran through metal corridors, their footsteps echoing like thunder. Engineers tightened bolts, loaded weapons, and activated systems. Mechanics checked engines with speed unheard of on other planets. Everyone moved with a sharp focus that only Deathworlders could show during a crisis. At Earth's main space dock, the largest carriers began to activate. These carriers were so huge that they looked like floating cities. Their engines hummed like deep beasts waking from sleep. Hundreds of fighters were loaded into their hangars, each one checked and rechecked for any signs of malfunction. Human crews worked with practiced precision, their hands moving fast as if the fate of the galaxy depended on them because, in their minds, it truly did. Meanwhile, messages spread quickly across nearby human colonies. Soldiers were called back from training missions. Pilots were ordered to return to their ships. Medical teams prepared for emergency treatment of alien civilians they had never met before. Everyone knew the mission wasn't about conquest or military pride. It was about answering a plea for help. Humans had a habit of showing up when no one else would, and they intended to continue that habit. But even with their determination, the situation was not easy. The Ravik's ships were known for heavy armor and deadly weapons. Fighting them required serious planning and extreme readiness. In the main command center aboard the battleship Vanguard, officers analyzed Ravok's strategies and studied their previous attacks in other regions. They discovered a chilling truth. If humans didn't move fast, Valera would fall completely. The planet had only a short window of time left before the invaders reached its core cities. Back on Valera, fear had settled into every corner. The glowing forests no longer felt magical. The twin moons, once symbols of beauty, now looked like two cold eyes watching silently. People moved in hurried lines toward underground shelters. Some carried small bags. Others carried nothing but the clothes on their backs. The oldest elders struggled to walk, their hearts heavy with the thought that they might not see their beloved sky again. Valorian scientists continued trying to contact other civilizations, sending the SOS message again and again. They recorded new versions with more details, hoping it would increase their chances. But deep down, most of them knew the truth. If no one had answered yet, maybe no one ever would. They could only wait. But something was happening far away that the Valorians could not see in the human fleet. A deep silence filled the ship's knot. A silence of fear, but of determination. Soldiers checked their gear quietly. Pilots closed their eyes and took deep breaths before stepping into their fighters. Medics prepared beds, tools, and supplies for the wounded they expected to rescue. The engines hummed louder as the ships prepared for hyperspace travel. It was a strange moment, calm before the storm. Human morale was extremely high. They knew this mission would be dangerous, but they also knew they were doing something meaningful. Humans had always had a complicated reputation in the galaxy. Some species admired their bravery, while others feared their aggressive nature. But very few understood the truth. Humans fought not because they loved violence, but because they could not stand watching innocent lives being destroyed. This mission was proof of that truth. As the fleet neared its launch time, the Leadership Council sent one final message to all ships. The message was brief but powerful. It reminded the crews that they were not only fighting to protect another world, they were fighting to show the galaxy what humanity stood for. Many soldiers felt their chests tighten with emotion. They were ready. On Valora, the atmosphere grew more tense. The Raviks had reached another colony, and this time the attack was even more brutal. Reports came in of fires spreading across entire districts, families running in panic, communications with some areas suddenly cut off. The council realized they had to prepare for the enemy to reach the main planet any day now. Some Valorians gathered on the top of their crystal towers, looking up at the sky in silence. They hoped, almost prayed, that somewhere out there someone had heard their cry. As hours turned into days, The pressure increased on both sides. For the Valorians, fear was the rising challenge. For humans, the challenge was speed, moving fast enough to arrive before it was too late. The final preparations for the fleet were completed. The ships aligned in a perfect formation. The engines glowed with bright blue light. Across the massive communication screens, countdown numbers appeared. Officers stood at attention. Pilots secured their helmets. Soldiers tightened their gloves. Medics secured their equipment. Everyone watched the countdown with eyes filled with resolve. 9-8. In the command center, the human commander looked at his officers. "We move for them," he said quietly. 6-5. Human hearts beat fast, but not out of fear, out of purpose. 4-3-2. Across the galaxy, the Valorians huddled in their shelters, waiting for the sound of enemy ships, believing they were alone. The human fleet jumped into hyperspace, slicing through the darkness like a storm unleashed from a cage. Help was coming, but Valora had no idea how powerful, how fierce, and how unstoppable their protectors really were. The human fleet burst out of hyperspace with a violent flash of blue light, but there was nothing peaceful about the sight that followed. Thousands of kilometers in every direction, Ravok's warships were already positioned around the Valorian system like a thick ring of knives. The invading fleet looked dark, heavy, and threatening, their metal surfaces reflecting the distant sun like cold steel. The Valorians on the surface did not yet know what was happening above their sky. They only felt a strange vibration in the air and wondered if the worst had begun. Inside the human command ship, alarms blinked as sensors read the enemy's strength. Officers observed the screens with sharp eyes. The Ravok's fleet was huge. It was larger than expected, so large that any normal species would have retreated immediately. But humans were not known for retreating. When they saw danger, their first instinct was to analyze it and then find a way to break through it. The human commander stood in the center of the room, his hands behind his back, his expression as calm as stone. He studied the enemy formation, the distance to the planet, and the direction of Ravok's gunfire. Everything pointed to one truth. The Valorians had been minutes away from total collapse. The timing of the human arrival was almost impossibly close. The Ravok ships scanned the newcomers, confused at first. They had not expected anyone to come to help the peaceful species usually avoided Ravok's battles. Even strong species rarely interfered. But now, a fully armed human fleet stood before them, silent and unmoving like a wall of metal giants. The Ravok's commander sent a communication request, trying to speak first. Perhaps they thought humans could be intimidated with threats. Perhaps they thought humanity would hesitate. The message reached the human bridge. A Ravok's officer with sharp metal ridges on his face appeared on screen. His voice was cold and arrogant. He warned the humans to leave immediately. He said that this was Ravok's territory now, and anyone entering would be destroyed. The entire message was spoken with the confidence of someone who believed they were unbeatable, but humans did not reply with words. The human commander simply turned toward his officers and gave a single nod. In the next second, the silence of space exploded. Human destroyers fired their first volley of plasma cannons, slicing through the Ravok's flagship before the invaders could even react. The Ravok's commander's image on the screen vanished in a burst of static. Shock rippled through the enemy formation. The human fleet moved with terrifying precision, spreading out like a pack of predators. Fighters launched from carriers in synchronized waves, each one glowing with the heat of high-speed engines. Within moments, the battle turned chaotic. From the ground, Valorians saw streaks of bright light crossing their sky. Some thought it was the Ravok's beginning their final attack. Children cried and parents held them closer. The council feared this was the end, but then something happened that none of them expected. A strange symbol appeared in the sky, holograms, one that did not belong to the Ravok's. It was the mark of the human fleet. The Valorians watched in disbelief as the foreign symbol glowed brighter, announcing that someone had come. Above their heads, the battle intensified. The Ravok ships launched dozens of missiles, trying to overwhelm the humans with sheer force. But human ships were built for harsh environments and extreme danger. Their shielding systems activated instantly, absorbing blasts that would have destroyed weaker vessels. Human pilots swerved through the battlefield with incredible skill, dodging enemy fire and striking back with deadly accuracy. One Ravok's cruiser tried to escape the fight by moving toward the planet, hoping to use the Valorian population as hostages or shields. But the human fleet anticipated this. A squadron of human interceptors descended like arrows, engines screaming as they cut through space. The lead pilot locked onto the Ravok's cruiser and fired a burst of missiles. The cruiser exploded into a massive red cloud, lighting up the night side of the planet like a second sunrise. Inside the shelters on Valora, people stared at the bright flashes and wondered what was happening. The council sent drones to monitor the sky. Slowly, the truth reached them. Someone was fighting the Ravok's, someone strong, someone dangerous, but not to them. Rumors spread quickly through the underground chambers. Some whispered that their message must have reached a powerful alliance. Others whispered an old fear. What if the new fleet was even worse than the Ravok? But then, for the first time, a Valorian scout drone picked up a clear image. It showed a human battleship firing at the Ravix. The Valorians recognized the markings from old star charts. Shock spread across the planet. Humans had come. Deathworlders, the species famous for surviving hurricanes, volcanoes, wars, and disasters, were fighting on their behalf. Meanwhile, the battle reached its most intense point. Revox reinforcements arrived through hyperspace, forming a second battle line. They tried to surround the human fleet from all sides, hoping to crush them with numbers, but human commanders adapted instantly. They changed formations, repositioned their carriers, and redirected firepower. Human AI systems predicted enemy movement, guiding pilots through dangerous maneuvers. Ravix ships exploded one after another. The Ravix began to panic. They had fought many species before, but humans fought differently. Humans did not attack with fear. They attacked with purpose. They did not shoot wildly. They targeted engines, command centers, and weapon cores with perfect precision. And above all, humans did not retreat unless absolutely necessary. They advanced, even under heavy fire. A group of human marines prepared for planetary landing. Their ship shook as enemy shots hit nearby. The marines stood in rows, checking their armor, helmets, and weapons. They knew they were going into Ravix-controlled zones on Vela. Their mission was to rescue civilians and break enemy occupation. Most species feared landing under fire, but humans felt adrenaline instead of fear. They had landed in war zones before. This was just another day for them. As the landing craft descended, the sky turned red with laser fire. The ships dropped rapidly, engines burning hot, pushing through enemy resistance. Ravix ground troops aimed their cannons upward. Explosions rocked the air, but the human landing craft burst through the clouds and smashed into enemy lines with unstoppable force. The doors opened, and human marines charged out. On the ground, the Ravix were larger and stronger, but humans were faster and sharper. They fought with teamwork, covering each other, signaling targets, moving in patterns no Ravix soldier had ever seen. It was like watching a storm of metal and fire sweep across the battlefield. For the first time since entering Valorian territory, the Ravix lost ground. They tried to push back, but the humans were relentless. The Valorians hiding in underground shelters heard deep vibrations above them. Some thought it was another attack, but the vibrations were different. They were sharper, more rhythmic, like distant footsteps of metal giants. Slowly and cautiously, a small group opened one of the shelter doors to observe. They saw human marines advancing through the city streets, pushing the Ravix back. The sight was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Humans wore heavy armor, their faces hidden behind dark helmets, their weapons glowing like pieces of a dying star. The Valerians had never seen such determination. These strange beings moved with confidence, almost like warriors from old legends. But then something surprising happened. A Valerian child ran toward the humans by accident, crying and trying to find her parents. A Ravix soldier aimed his weapon at her. A human marine dashed forward, shielding the child with his own body, and took down the Revox enemy in one swift motion. Instead of yelling or intimidating the child, the marine knelt down gently and guided her back to safety. This moment spread through the Valorian shelters like a spark of hope. The Deathworlders were terrifying, but they were fighting for them, not against them. Above the planet, the battle in orbit reached its peak. The human flagship moved into the center of the battlefield, taking direct hits from Revox cannons. Alarms rang through its corridors. Shields flickered, but the commander refused to fall back. The ship fired its main cannon, a massive blue beam that tore through the largest Revox dreadnought. The shockwave from the explosion forced several enemy ships to lose formation, giving the human fleet the advantage they needed. Slowly, the Ravix line broke. One by one, Ravix ships began fleeing the system. Their commanders sent desperate retreat orders. Some Ravix vessels tried to cloak and escape, but human scanners detected them easily. Fighters chased them down, destroying the fleeing ships with precision shots. The humans did not allow any Ravix forces to regroup or return. On the ground, the remaining Ravix soldiers surrendered or fell in battle. Human medics arrived soon after, treating injured Valorians even before tending to their own wounded. They moved quickly, applying medicine, stabilizing patients, and calming terrified civilians. For the first time since the crisis began, Valora felt a breath of relief. The sky cleared. The air became quiet again. The heavy metallic smell of battle lingered. But the danger had passed. The Valorians looked up at the human ships shining above their world, their hearts full of disbelief. They had expected death. Instead, they were saved by the species the galaxy always warned them about, the Deathworlders. Humanity had arrived, not with gentle voices but with fire and steel, and the galaxy would remember this day forever. The battle that had seemed endless finally began to turn in favor of the humans. The Ravix forces, once confident and overwhelming, were now disorganized, retreating, and panicked. Human strategy and precision had broken their formations in ways no enemy had ever anticipated. Every maneuver, every strike, and every tactical choice demonstrated why humans were feared throughout the galaxy. They had arrived not to negotiate, not to reason, but to resolve the crisis completely. Their approach was ruthless in efficiency. yet carefully controlled to protect the Valorians who had called for help on the surface. The Valorians could hardly believe what was happening. They watched the human Marines move through their cities, clearing out pockets of Ravok soldiers who had dug in to resist. The Marines worked with astonishing coordination. They did not rush recklessly. They did not fire blindly. They advanced slowly, covering one another, scanning every corner, checking every shadow for hidden enemies. It was a level of disciplined intensity that was entirely new to the peaceful Valorian. Families who had been hiding underground now watched cautiously as the humans marched through their streets, each step a display of power and purpose. The human commanders had one simple goal: eliminate all remaining Ravok's forces and ensure that the Valorians could survive without further threat. The fleet above Valora maintained tight control of space. Any Ravok ship attempting to escape was immediately detected and neutralized. The humans had not come to negotiate or to test their weapons, they had come to finish the job. And they did so with terrifying efficiency. Each explosion in the sky signaled progress, but also reminded the Valorians that these beings were unlike any they had ever seen. Humans were protective, but unstoppable in battle. On the ground, the situation was equally dramatic. The last pockets of Ravok's resistance tried to make desperate stands, barricading themselves in buildings or attempting ambushes, but human tactics were flawless. Every squad moved with synchronized precision, advancing through the city while covering all possible angles of attack. Their weapons were advanced, their reflexes sharp, and their minds coordinated through constant communication. The Ravaks could not predict human movements. They could not anticipate the calculated speed at which humans closed off escape routes and eliminated threats. In one particularly tense moment, a group of Ravak soldiers had trapped several Valorian families inside a partially destroyed building. The soldiers aimed their weapons, confident they had hostages that no human would risk attacking directly. But the humans had anticipated such tactics. A squad of Marines approached silently, using the ruins as cover. Without hesitation, they neutralized the Ravak's guards and cleared a safe path for the civilians. Then, in an astonishing display of calm amidst chaos, the Marines guided the frightened Valorians to safety, checking their health and ensuring they were unharmed. The civilians, who had expected death, now experienced something that seemed almost impossible: rescue. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued to assert control in orbit. The main battleship focused on neutralizing Ravok's capital ships, while smaller vessels engaged remaining fighters. Missiles streaked across space, plasma beams tore through armor, and electronic warfare systems disrupted enemy communications. Every move was calculated to dismantle Ravok's power completely. The Valorians could only watch, their eyes wide with awe. They had expected allies, but not such overwhelming force. The humans fought like living storms, and nothing could stand in their way. Back on the planet's surface, medics and engineers worked alongside soldiers. Human medics moved quickly to stabilize injured Valorians, applying advanced treatments and carefully organizing evacuation to safer areas. Engineers began repairing critical infrastructure, restoring power to essential systems, and ensuring that the Valorians could begin to rebuild even while danger still lingered. Every step was coordinated, every action purposeful. Humans had not arrived merely to fight. They had arrived to secure survival and restore order. For the Valorians, the experience was almost overwhelming. They had spent their lives in peace, learning about diplomacy, culture, and science. Violence was foreign to them. The scale, precision, and intensity of the human response was something they had never imagined. They began to understand why other civilizations had feared humans for so long. Deathworlders were not inherently cruel. They were effective. When confronted with danger or injustice, they acted decisively, and they did so with a commitment that was almost frightening in its clarity. At one point, the human commander decided it was time to end the battle completely. From orbit, the flagship deployed a coordinated strike pattern targeting the remaining Ravok's positions. Ground teams synchronized with orbital units to ensure that no enemies could escape, and the remaining Ravok soldiers were systematically removed. Even as explosions erupted around them, humans maintained discipline, carefully avoiding civilian areas while eliminating all threats. The Valorians, witnessing this, began to feel hope for the first time in weeks. Their home, once on the brink of destruction, was being secured by beings who had no hesitation in protecting them. As the last Ravok's forces fell, the human Marines regrouped and secured the city. They checked for survivors, confirmed that no civilians were left in danger, and began organizing temporary shelters and aid stations. Engineers moved swiftly to restore critical communications and energy systems, while medics treated anyone who had been injured. It was not just victory, it was controlled, thoughtful, and complete restoration. The Valorians were stunned. They had sent a simple SOS into space, expecting perhaps a few advisors, diplomats, or small rescue teams. Instead, the response had been massive, overwhelming, and decisive. Humans had not simply arrived, they had taken full responsibility for the situation, ensuring that the Ravok's threat was eliminated and that Valora itself would survive. The elders, who had feared the end, now could barely believe their eyes. They had never imagined a species so powerful would act with such protective intent. A child, peeking from behind a human medic, whispered to her parents. "They are safe." Her parents, holding back tears, nodded. It was the first reassurance many had felt in weeks. The streets, once filled with smoke and rubble, were slowly being cleared. The air, heavy with the stench of battle, began to carry a strange sense of calm. It was not the calm of Valora before the Ravaks arrived. It was a new calm, one created by safety and protection. Human soldiers began sharing simple gestures of kindness, helping elderly Valorians walk through debris, carrying supplies to those in need, and offering comfort to frightened children. Every human action, though part of their duty, displayed a strange duality, terrifying in combat, yet gentle and careful with the helpless. The Valorians, who had never seen violence as part of life, now understood the full meaning of humanity's strength. It was a force that could destroy and protect with equal intensity. Above the planet, the fleet maintained vigilance. Even as the last Ravik ships were destroyed or fled, humans did not lower their guard. They monitored the space around Valora, ensuring that no reinforcements could arrive to threaten the planet again. They knew that galaxy was vast, and enemies often regrouped, but they were prepared. Their presence alone was enough to guarantee that Valora would remain safe, at least for now. As the final Ravok's ship exploded in the distance, a collective sense of relief spread across the Valorian population. People stepped cautiously out of shelters, scanning the skies. Families embraced one another, tears streaming freely. For weeks, they had lived under constant fear of annihilation, and now that fear had been replaced with hope. Hope that their home would survive, hope that their children could live without terror, and hope that they were not alone in the galaxy. The human commander watched the last Ravok's transmissions disappear into static and finally allowed himself a brief sigh of relief. His focus never wavered for long. Humans did not fight for glory, they fought to fulfill a promise. The promise was simple: if someone asked for help, they would answer. And now, that promise had been kept. The Valorians slowly began to step forward, cautiously approaching the humans who had saved them. There was no fear in their eyes anymore, only awe and gratitude. They had expected strangers, perhaps warriors, but nothing like this. They had never imagined that anyone would move so quickly, act so decisively, and yet show compassion amidst such overwhelming power for the first time. The Valorian elders felt a deep understanding of what it meant to encounter a species called Deathworlders. Humans were feared not because they sought conflict. They were feared because they could act decisively in the face of danger. They were unpredictable to those who valued negotiation over action. They were relentless, powerful, and unwavering in their commitment. But most importantly, they acted for the helpless when no one else would. The aftermath of the battle was not chaos but structured care. Human teams organized safe zones, established temporary medical facilities, and created secure transport corridors for civilians. Engineers repaired energy grids, medical systems, and communication networks. Even in the middle of a war zone, humans acted with foresight, ensuring that Valora's recovery would begin immediately. The planet had been saved, and the humans would stay until they were certain the Ravaks could not return. As night fell over Valora, the city lights slowly came back on, repaired and powered by human technology. The skies cleared of smoke, and the first stars appeared above once more. The Valorians looked at the humans standing on the streets below, and slowly, they began to understand the truth. Their planet had been saved not by luck, not by diplomacy, but by the most terrifyingly effective beings in the galaxy. Humans had arrived, destroyed the threat, and ensured survival. And in doing so, they had shown the Valerians what it meant to be protected by a species that would never ignore a call for help. It was a victory beyond what anyone could have imagined, a resolution that would change the history of Valora forever. The battle had ended. The Ravok's threat was gone, and the Valerians slowly began to breathe again. But even as the immediate danger passed, the people of Valora realized that life would never be the same. Their world, once calm and untouched by violence, had been forced to face destruction. Their cities bore the scars of attack, their forests and fields had been trampled or burned, and their minds carried the memory of fear. For generations they had believed that peace would always protect them. Now they understood that peace alone was fragile, and that survival often required intervention from those strong enough to fight when others could not. The humans, the Deathworlders, remained on the planet, not because they wanted glory, but because they were committed to completing the promise they had implicitly made. The Valerians had called for help, and humanity had answered. Human ships still orbited the planet, maintaining surveillance to ensure that no Ravok's forces could return. Human engineers worked alongside Valorian scientists to rebuild essential structures. Bridges, energy grids, and communication arrays that had been damaged in the fighting were repaired, often in ways that were far more advanced than the Valorians could have imagined. The people watched as humans moved with precision and efficiency, almost as if they were reshaping the planet to be stronger and safer than it had ever been before. For the Valorians, the first days after the battle were filled with awe and gratitude. They had survived not because of their own strength, but because of the humans' power, strategy, and relentless drive. Families ventured out of shelters cautiously, seeing soldiers and medics tending to the streets, clearing debris, and comforting those who were still terrified. Children who had spent weeks hiding in fear now watched human marines and pilots with wide eyes, curious about these strange beings who had arrived from the stars to save them. The elders gathered again, this time not in fear but in cautious appreciation. They studied the humans carefully. They realized that the Deathworlders were unlike any species they had encountered. Humans were strong and dangerous, but they were also compassionate when it mattered most. They had fought relentlessly against the Ravaks, yet they had protected the helpless Valor. They had not taken resources, claimed territory, or demanded obedience. They had simply acted according to a principle that was foreign to the Valorians. When someone cries for help, you do not hesitate. You answer, you fight, you protect. Over the next few weeks, humans helped Valora recover in a way that was methodical and efficient. They set up temporary schools, medical centers, and supply depots. Engineers taught Valorian workers how to rebuild energy systems more resiliently. Soldiers trained in basic defensive strategies, not to prepare for war, but to teach the Valorians how to protect themselves from future attacks. For the first time, the people of Valora realized that survival was not just about peace, it was also about preparedness, about knowing that danger could arrive at any moment. The Valorians began to reflect on what had happened. They thought about the fear they had felt when the Ravaks first invaded. They remembered the moments when families were hiding underground, unsure if they would see the sun again. They remembered the helplessness that filled the streets when their homes were destroyed and the world above seemed out of reach. And then they remembered the humans, their sudden, terrifying, unstoppable arrival. Humans had arrived with overwhelming power, but they had also moved with care, saving lives while destroying the enemy. The elders discussed the lessons learned. They realized that their peaceful existence had been a strength in some ways. It allowed them to build a harmonious civilization, but it had also been a vulnerability. They had assumed that no one would attack them, that others would respect their peaceful ways. But the galaxy was full of species like the Ravaks, who did not care about peace and who only respected power. The Valorians understood that they had been fortunate to call humans a species capable of both ferocity and protection. Meanwhile, the humans began to prepare for departure. They could not stay indefinitely. Their mission was not occupation but aid. Ships were repaired, crews rested, and medical supplies were replenished. The human commander gathered with the Valorian council one last time to explain their departure. He spoke in a language translated by advanced devices, but his words carried weight. He told them that humans would always answer a call for help, but that the Valorians must learn to stand stronger in their own defense as well. He offered advice, shared techniques, and reminded them that the galaxy was dangerous, but they could survive if they remained alert, united, and willing to act when necessary. The Valorians listened carefully. They realized that humans were not just powerful, they were wise in the ways of survival. They respected life but understood death. They understood strategy, timing, and sacrifice in ways that the Valorians had never needed to consider. That humans had arrived, fought, and ensured safety not for gain but for principle. And this realization left a lasting impression. Children who had watched the battle from shelters or from behind hiding places were now curious about the humans' abilities. They asked questions about how the ships could travel so fast, how the Marines moved with such precision, and why humans could fight so fiercely yet protect so gently. Adults told them stories of courage and coordination, stories of bravery that seemed almost like myths compared to the peaceful world they had known before. These stories would shape the next generation, teaching them lessons about resilience, courage, and gratitude. Over time, the Valerians rebuilt their cities. They planted new trees in the forests that had been burned. They repaired their floating gardens and crystal towers. But they did so with a new awareness. They incorporated some of the defensive strategies humans had shared. They created safe zones, early warning systems, and evacuation plans, not because they wanted war, but because they had learned that the galaxy could be unpredictable, and preparation was a form of survival. The memory of the humans lingered in their culture. Songs were composed about the mysterious Deathworlders who had arrived from the stars. Poems and stories spoke of their strength, their speed, and their careful protection of the weak. Even those who had never seen the humans directly felt inspired by the tales. The Valorians began to see the universe differently, not just as a place of beauty, but as a place that could be dangerous, where courage, quick thinking, and strength mattered as much as kindness and wisdom. For the humans, the mission was almost routine by comparison. They had encountered countless situations in which their strength and speed were needed. They had learned long ago that life was precious, and that answering a call for help was not optionally, it was a responsibility. But even for them, Valora had been special. The planet's beauty, its gentle people, and the stakes of their mission had made the rescue feel personal. As their ships left orbit, they maintained surveillance long enough to ensure no Ravok's forces would return. Then, satisfied, they returned to the stars, leaving behind a world forever changed by their presence. The Valorians reflected on the nature of the humans they had met. They realized that while humans were feared by some, that fear was based on misunderstanding. Humans did not start wars they did not need, but when a call for help arrived, humans acted with an intensity and focus that few could match. Their arrival was frightening because it was absolute no hesitation, no half measures, just decisive action. Yet it was also comforting because it was purposeful and protective. They understood danger in ways the Valorians never had to, and that understanding made them uniquely capable of defending the helpless. Generations later, the story of the human intervention became central to Valorian culture. Scholars recorded every detail, from the first moment the SOS was sent to the final cleanup after the battle. Children learned of the bravery, strategy, and care that had saved their planet. Elders used the story to teach lessons about caution, preparation, and the importance of asking for help when needed. Valorians never forgot that a species once thought terrifying had become their savior, their protector, and their inspiration. The Valorians also reflected on themselves. They realized that vulnerability was not a weakness when one could ask for help wisely. Courage was not just about fighting, it was about recognizing danger and taking steps to survive. They embraced a new understanding of the galaxy, knowing that kindness could coexist with preparation, and that a world could remain peaceful while also being strong enough to endure challenges for humans. The mission was over, but the lessons left behind echoed across the stars. The galaxy would remember Velu not only as a peaceful planet but as a world saved by the Deathworld, as a species capable of terrifying power, unmatched resilience, and compassionate protection. Their reputation as protectors of the helpless grew stronger. Other civilizations whispered about them with respect and sometimes fear, knowing that if a call for help reached a human ear, no enemy could stand in the way. The Valorians had learned the most important lesson of all, that survival sometimes required trusting those who were willing to act, even if their ways were foreign and their methods frightening. They learned that courage and preparation were as important as peace, and that help could arrive from the most unexpected places. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and often dangerous, but for the Valorians, hope had arrived in the form of humans, and that hope would never fade. Years passed, and the planet slowly returned to normal. Life resumed, children grew, and forests reeked, but the story of the humans, the Deathworlders who had arrived when all seemed lost, remained a cornerstone of Valorian history. Statues were built, songs composed, and stories passed down, celebrating not only the victory but the lesson. When a cry for help is sent into the stars, sometimes it reaches those who will never ignore it, those who act with unmatched determination, and those whose strength becomes the shield for the weak. The Valorians never forgot that their peaceful world had survived because someone answered their call. They never forgot the humans, terrifying and yet protective, unstoppable and yet careful, who had arrived not for conquest, but for life itself. And in that memory, the people of Valera found courage, hope, and the understanding that even in a dangerous universe, there were allies strong enough to protect them, and that some calls for help are answered in ways beyond imagination. The galaxy would never forget that day, and neither would the Valorians. The humans had left, but their impact remained a lesson of strength, courage, and protection that would echo through generations, shaping the way a peaceful world understood itself, its place in the galaxy, and the meaning of true allies. The memory of the Deathworlders would endure, a promise fulfilled, a danger defeated, and a civilization forever saved.